welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I am Jessica. I'm your host, and this is really exciting for me because my interviewee today, our guest, is somebody who I knew when he was very, very young. He used to come into the children's room with his brother, and literally the Syosset Library has seen him grow, and now he is here to talk about a really cool project that he worked on. And it's something that I love, which is stop motion animation. I am an animation fiend. It is one of my favorite things. So as soon as I heard about your video, Lawrence, and what it was, I was automatically like, well, we're going to have to talk to him about this. So Lawrence Hahn, welcome to the show.
So hi. So the project that I've been working on is I actually made this several years ago, and I'm working on several new projects more recently. But the project that I worked on several years ago, back in I think middle school, was called True Passion, and it's basically a stop motion claymation where it's stop motion but using clay figures, and where the general plot is a clay figure named Yellow, right? And he loves reading books and going to the library, but he eventually gets influenced by his friends to start playing video games, where he basically loses his original passion of reading books and realizes that maybe playing video games and going along with the crowd isn't the best thing in the world. And he eventually goes back to reading books and actually encourages his other friends to go find what they're really passionate in and not just follow what everyone else is doing. So that's the general plot. And stop motion is essentially where you have like a character that I made, and then I move it just a little bit, and then you take another picture, and then you move it again, take another picture, and then once you have about 100, several hundred pictures usually, and then you would put them into an editing software. The one I used was Windows Live Movie Maker, which I don't think is operating right now because it was quite a long time ago. But you basically put them into an editing software, and each image will be playing. Each image would be on screen for about a half a second, and then or even shorter than that. And then once you combine all of them together, then it looks like they're actually moving all by themselves without the help of a hand. So it's not like a puppet, but it's a lot more autonomous than that. And if you speed it up even more, it looks really smooth and also looks really nice. So yeah, and it's not only the clay figures, but I also had to hand create the backgrounds using pieces of magazines, construction paper, using Sharpies to create a nice background, and also some Legos to make it look a little bit more 3D in the background. So that I think that really added to the visuals of the film.
So how did you get started in stop motion? As you mentioned, it is extremely time consuming. In a way, it's like you really have to love it to do it that way. How did your interest in it begin, and how did you get started in it?
Yeah, so I used to watch a lot of movies, and I think this is pretty similar for most creative people, is just consuming the same medium. So one in particular was Shaun the Sheep, and I think it was a pretty fun movie. It was maybe the plot wasn't the most memorable part, but it was definitely the animation that kind of stuck with me because I still remember some of the cooler scenes, and I'm just wondering how did they do the mouth stuff? How are they moving around so quickly and so fluidly? And I actually went to a museum. This is not really, it wasn't right afterwards, but my family actually and a bunch of friends, we went to a museum about these visual arts of stop motion animation, I think it's the Museum of the Moving Image. And we actually went there, and it was pretty cool because they had a bunch of stuff about stop motion animation. and it really got me pretty interested in how to do this. And this is like one of my first like attempts at it. And of course, I've done stuff with like Legos in the past, but it wasn't anything huge. And basically watch a bunch of YouTube tutorials about how to get started, and all of them had pretty fancy software where it had overlays of like the previous frame. But I basically just went along with just trying to keep it as consistent as possible. And I didn't really use any fancy software, but I really tried to absorb as much as I could from like what I could find for free online. So some tips that I found were basically to like cover up all your windows with curtains and blinds, like blackout shades. So over time, if once you put it, since it takes time to move these characters around, like once you put them into a huge timeline on your video editor, then you would realize that the sun is setting or the sun is rising as the time goes on, and you really don't want that. So basically, just close out all the lights and only have a synthetic light source. That's like one of the tips that I learned along the way. And while making the figures for claymation, it's pretty important to basically, since I didn't finish this all in one day, of course. I think it took around like 2 or 3 weeks to like finish all like the taking a picture and putting it to the editor. It took about like several weeks. So I had to basically make the clay figure. And I made it only once because what happened is I would put it inside a box of like wet paper towels so it would stay moist, the clay would stay moist. And so I could reuse it the next day or like the day after. And so I wouldn't have to recreate it because obviously I'm not like a professional clay artist. And I don't think it would be really difficult to recreate the exact same figure every single time I wanted to restart taking pictures. So that's what I did is basically put it in a moist container so I'd be able to reuse it the next day. So yeah, that's how I got started.
Cool. Yeah, I actually am familiar with Shaun the Sheep, and that animator Nick Parks is really, I think, somebody who brought claymation to a lot of our attentions. He really, yeah, his stuff was really interesting and really well done. So my question, I suppose, is, so are you graduating this year?
I'm actually not graduating this year. I'm actually a junior and I'm going to my senior year. So
Wow, so you have you still have some time here at Syosset. What other projects are you working on at the moment?
so so during COVID, basically I've been like scrolling during COVID. That was like when I was in seventh grade or eighth grade, and I was always like online scrolling. And what I realized is like over time I saw a like on Reddit basically I saw this like program that is basically allowing people to like make really cool 3D software and like cool visuals like bubbles and like simulations like those satisfying clay 3D renders that you may have seen online. Oddly satisfying compilations. And I was pretty interested in how people were making those. So I basically found a subreddit where people are sharing all these animations, these simulations on r/simulated, where they're basically talking about how they're making these and they're just sharing the best ones of all time. And it just got me really interested in this 3D software called Blender. And I was pretty interested in it. So what happened is I basically dedicated a couple hours every day to learn it. And in the beginning, I was pretty scared of like actually learning it. So like, I was wondering like, am I actually gonna be good at this? So I actually watched a lot of YouTube videos before even downloading the software on my computer. And my computer at the time was a pretty normal one. It was pretty buggy. It wasn't as good as the laptop I have now, so it was a pretty slow process. But I watched a lot of YouTube videos just to get inspiration, just to see if it was really something I wanted to invest my time in. Because like the only like I had almost zero experience with any kind of computer art. I only had like the stop motion animation at the time. And what happened is I watched all these videos and then I finally downloaded it. And I started following this specific series that is very famous in the Blender community, which is like the donut tutorial by a Blender guru. And I followed the entire tutorial. I was able to learn like all the basics that I really wanted to know. And in the beginning, after completing the tutorial, I felt pretty confident about my skills. But then like as the more I scrolled on like online and social media and Reddit, and I realized like how much more I really had to learn about this program. So obviously I started to look at like more tutorials past like that. Like it was the donut tutorial is made by a YouTuber for free, and it has like 20 some episodes. And you basically learn everything from like how to actually use the interface to how to finally create like your first animation of like a donut like coming into the screen and like with a coffee in the background. And you learn all about like, how to make materials and lighting, and all that stuff is really all the basics that you have to know about it. And once I finished that, I started to watch other tutorials outside of that because there's so much more that I just think I needed to know about the program. So some stuff I watched, like how to create some animals, like in low polygon animals, how to create like more basic animations. And I was all obviously following along with these, and I actually had like a folder of everything I made from back then. I think I made like around like 10 pieces, 10 like just 10 frames. And then and also what I think one of my main goals at the time was just to make wallpapers for my computer or my phone. And I actually think I kept some of those wallpapers on my screen for like several years. And it's actually pretty funny that I just made those. I think I made most of them like within like a couple hours. So it's like in one night I just made like one wallpaper. And like usually they're just completely just following along with the tutorial like step for step. And not a lot of it was just from me. I just basically just copied someone else's work and just formatted it, shifted around some of the items by themselves, like moving around some of the objects on screen, just really just copying what they did, and it just basically just like saying, "Oh, I made this myself." But I really just copied this tutorial, and I basically just wasn't really that satisfied with that over time. After I made like 10, 15 like still frame like just pictures. So what happened is I wanted to really start making my own stuff. So what I did is I got my own. I basically closed the tutorials and started to make my own stuff. One of the first things that I made was this tiger on a globe. I don't even know where the picture is right now, but it's like this tiger sitting on top of a globe with some clouds above it. And I really thought what happened is I really wanted to look really amazing because I saw some really cool animated tigers online. And like what happened is it turned out really like low quality. It looked like a piece of fried chicken when I tried to like add fur to it. And it just
Oh
turned out.
wow, that's not wow, that's that's a visual right there.
Yeah, so I thought it looked hilarious. And it was actually my wallpaper for quite a while because I thought it was so funny. And that didn't really stop me from like continuing. So I obviously kept learning and like our learning strategies until I finally decided to put my skills together and create a little like a 5 minute short film. So what I did was I basically created a short film called Nature Matters, and it's basically just like there's not a very strong plot, but it's just a bunch of nature scenes like on a farm, like a lake, and and like a bird. So like a large forest shot. So obviously it wasn't very impressive visually, but I think it does the job in terms of like you could tell what's going on pretty clearly. I think the lighting looked pretty standard, and obviously it wasn't photorealistic as like most of like CGI is today, but it was basically low poly, whereas like very angular and very flat, it has a lot of flat sides, all the animals. But I basically compiled all of those, like it had like several scenes where it's just a bird exploring these like 3D landscapes with other animals in them. And that really so it turned out to be like around 5 minutes long. So I compiled it into one video, did some editing, like added some music and sound effects, and that was basically my first short film in 3D. And over time, and I was pretty proud of it at the time. So obviously I wanted to keep going by like experimenting with new things. So I made another one. So I made like another short film with like cars in it, and obviously I followed a bunch of other tutorials. I had to learn how to like make a car, like basically have a 3D car and then have it follow along a 3D path. And so that was pretty cool. So I learned a lot about like the math tools or like all like the number based tools that you can actually use because like this program Blender has is a doorway to so many things. And actually, I think that I think several like professional film studios are actually using Blender for CGI, like VFX. I think they're all using that actually now. So I think that was pretty interesting that they actually that was one of the things that actually inspired me early on, is because this program Blender was actually free and is actually being used by industry professionals. Like I wasn't on that level of industry professionals, but like the fact that that learning this skill could actually lead up to having something like that is like was pretty inspiring, that I could learn up to that. But I ended up making like a short film about like cars driving on a highway, and there's some bikes in there too. So I learned about like people, like human animation, and like how to basically rig a person. So I would create a stick figure of a person, and then you could put this thing called a rig inside, where it's like a skeleton, like a virtual skeleton. And once you basically like the computer does a lot of the work, but afterwards you can basically click a joint of the skeleton, and then you could basically move around your character that was originally like a piece of clay, and now it could actually move around without probably completely messing up like the anatomy of the figure. So obviously it wasn't a very detailed biker. It actually the biker didn't have a face, because I didn't even know how to create like an accurate face. But the bikers had no face in the film, which was pretty weird. But I think it turned out pretty nice overall. Like they didn't really show up that much in the film, but and by film I mean short film. It's just like it was about 5 minutes long. And the next one I made was like about like these like sci-fi astronaut workers. So it was obviously my sci-fi like phase or whatever, where I wanted to create some cool sci-fi stuff with like cool vehicles and like sci-fi looking buildings. And that one took a really long time. And my more recent one was Fire in the Forest, where I actually submitted this one to several competitions, and I saw some pretty good results. But in this one was probably my best looking short film so far, where I actually had it was basically a hedgehog, like a hedgehog that could walk on two legs. And what happened is he wakes up in like a forest that's on fire. And I think it's like a pretty I originally thought it was a pretty dark idea, but I thought that I thought it was a cool visual to have like some fire in the background and make it very atmospheric and like very moody scenes, because most of the tutorials I watched online, like they always have a preview in the beginning, and the ones that stuck, like the visuals that stuck with me the most, like in the tutorials, were the ones that had like really strong like emotional aspects, very like moody, and not just very oh very like dainty like on the top, but like something that really was very emotional and very dark, like in my opinion. So that's why I ended up making was something where like a hedgehog was in a forest fire, and he basically goes back in time to like the plot is he wakes up in the future by accident, where the forest is on fire, and then he basically teleports himself back in time. And I wasn't very good at storytelling, obviously. And I did this last summer, so it was actually very recent. I did this in high school. So I basically put he basically went back in time to before the forest fire even started, and he realized how he just basically met up with his family again, and he basically learned how like what caused the fire in the first place, and like what humans can do basically. And I thought it had like a pretty good like global warming message. Like it wasn't anything very scientific, but I thought it was pretty cool. And I think it actually looked better than all of my previous films, because it actually it took out like the humans, because whenever I make humans in the past, they always look really weird and janky. And like I think human animation is like one of the hardest things that like it's one of the harder things that you can do, because like the way humans like how they walk and how they interact with others is like you have to watch a lot of footage. I think even just drawing it is really difficult for beginners at least. And I didn't really have a lot of training in it, and not a lot of practice either. So I think just removing the humans altogether and just creating like an animal that moves very simply made it look a lot better. So just taking a step back and kind of returning to basics, or not really basics, but just returning something a lot simpler, just made it actually improved it by so much more by just taking a step back and choosing something a little bit simpler. Actually made it a lot easier for me in the end. So yeah, so that's some stuff I've been working on more recently. Yeah.
So, all this said, do you see, is that something you would like to do in the future? Are you looking to make films, or is it more like a hobby, or both?
So that's something I've been just like taught, I've been thinking about it a lot myself. And I think it's definitely something that is like pretty like career worthy, but I don't really know how, like, what are the job prospects for it really in like the real world. So that's one of the major concerns. I think it's something really fun that I would do in my free time, but like right now, I think it's like probably I would just consider it as like a hobby, that like one of my big hobbies that I would like put a couple hours into like every weekend. But right now it's just a big hobby. And if something really happens along the way, like if I meet someone like really important, then and they're in like this animation industry, then I might actually go into it as a career. But right now it's just a big hobby for me.
That is awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing it. Do you post your videos anywhere, or are they mostly kept to themselves at the moment?
Actually, I haven't posted the most recent one, the fire in the forest. I didn't post that one on YouTube yet, but I think I will in like the next few days, because I think most of the I don't think I was, for some reason I never posted on YouTube, but I think I will in the next few days. So
Well, thank you so much. This was awesome. It's so cool to just kind of hear how your mind works, and like, like how excited you get about like one thing going to another, going to another. And Blender, I've been hearing a lot of really interesting things about. Is it still free or not anymore?
yeah, it is 100% free. Like yeah, the founder,
Cool.
like they have some really cool stuff. I think the community, like they have like there's a really strong sense of community inside of this. Like maybe like in the like it's similar to like a gaming community almost. If you play any like online games, there's always like a big online community of gamers, and just like the same way they have like the online community of Blender artists who are always like chatting about how they can fix some visual bugs. They're always asking each other questions, sharing cool tips, and like sharing the funny moments. So I think there's a really strong sense of community that really kept me like held inside like that a 3D community for even longer. Because I feel like if there wasn't, then I feel like I maybe wouldn't have been that as interested. Because now there's like a social aspect where you can basically share your stuff online and get like almost like feedback like within a day. Like depending on where you post your work, you can get feedback within a day and get criticism and like constructive criticism, obviously. And you can see like other people will be very willing to help you out and to help you fix your like computer bugs. And the community is very supportive. So that was one of the things that really kept me in there for a long time.
Thank you so much. So once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. Our guest today was,
Lawrence Hahn.
who I'm sure like we're gonna like, it's a hobby, but I don't know. You seem to have some momentum. Maybe you're going places. Syosset does have a bit of a habit of turning people out and into the entertainment industry. So who knows?
Oh yeah, I also wanted to just thank Syosset Public Library for just being like a great place where like I went to all these children's programs as like an elementary schooler, and now I'm like every so often, maybe like every month or so, like or every 2 months or so, I would come in and volunteer. So I think it's just it's just a really great place for some opportunities, like free opportunities, and it's great because I learned a lot of things here, and I've obviously learned a lot while volunteering here too. So I think it's just like a great place to that I just want to thank you guys for just having such great opportunities over the years.
Thank you for saying that, and for being part of our community, and for volunteering, of course. So we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.